It's wonderful to have the three of you here to discuss this wonderful project, the Jerome Biblical Commentary for the 21st Century. We're in three different locations today, well, four, but three different places in London, Chicago, and in California. And I wonder if we could begin with some introductions. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Dominic. I'm the senior publisher at Bloomsbury T&T Clark, responsible for convincing these good people to give their time to this wonderful project. Barbara, you're at the top of my screen, so if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dominic. I'm Barbara Reid, and I've been teaching New Testament at Catholic Theological Union since 1988, and I'm now president of CTU, and I'm delighted to have been one of the general editors for this wonderful new edition of the Jerome Biblical Commentary.
Wonderful, thank you. Don, can I move to you next?
My name is Don Senior. I'm professor of New Testament at Catholic Theological Union, across the street now from Barbara. And I'm president emeritus of CTU. I don't know if that was a requirement to be on the editorial group, but in any way, I'm also delighted to be in association with Gina and Barbara, John Collins, who's also part of it, and for this wonderful project.
Thanks, Don. And last but not least, Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina Hens-Piazza, and I am at the Jesuit School of Theology, part of Santa Clara University, which is also part of the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley, California. I am not a president of our school, so it is not a qualification. I'm a professor of biblical studies. I've been at the Jesuit School since 1992.
Thanks, Gina. And we must, of course, as Don did, also mention John Collins, who is at Yale Divinity School and sadly can't be with us today, but he edited the Old Testament side of things along with Gina. Okay, well, the Jerome, I think, in some ways needs no introduction to people who'll be watching this video and listening to what we've got to say. But I think what probably does need an introduction is to discuss how this new edition of Jerome for the 21st century, how this edition is different from previous editions. And I think we've all got some thoughts on that. Barbara, if I could go to you first.
Sure, thank you, Dominic. Well, one of the things is that unlike the second edition of the JBC, which was not a full substantial revision, this version is completely new. And so every article has been written fresh. And there is a link, though, with the previous versions. Some of the same authors have contributed, but have totally redone their pieces. And also there's one article that preserves a good bit of one of the original authors, and that is the article on Romans that preserves a fair amount of what Joseph Fitzmyer had written in the previous edition. But in addition, there are some exciting new topical articles, things that were not in the previous editions. So articles on the Bible and interreligious and ecumenical dialogue, for example, the Bible from and social justice, the Bible and ethics, articles that place in contextual context how to read the Bible from different perspectives. And we'll say more about that in a few minutes, but it's a very exciting, all new Jerome commentary.
Thanks, Barbara. And it's wonderful to reflect on Fitzmyer sort of helping us out at the end, as I heard from people involved in the previous two editions that he was often there, sort of finishing up the commentaries for the previous two editions. So that's it's a nice link with the past, as well as all of the wonderful new material for the present and the future. Don, if I could move to you now for your thoughts on this topic.
Well, one of the things that struck me was the origin of the JBC back in 1968 when it was published was in the wake of the council, and it was to demonstrate the maturity of Catholic biblical scholarship. It was certainly ecumenical in spirit and drew in a lot of research from our Protestant colleagues. It was not like over against that, but it was trying to show from the Catholic perspective what would be the importance and the content of good biblical interpretation. And that's been a hallmark of each of the editions. Right after the 1990 edition, which was the last edition, the Pontifical Biblical Commission came out with a very important milestone on methodology, the variety of methods. It was honoring both Divino Afflante Spiritu, Pius XII, sort of Magna Carta of biblical scholarship, and Leo XIII's Providentissimus Deus also helped Catholic scholarship. And so in this, along with historical critical methods, which has been sort of the bread and butter of modern scholarship, there's all other kinds of interesting approaches from a sociological point of view, social sciences, feminist perspectives, different cultural perspectives, and so on. So this reflects the great diversity of biblical interpretation and the diversity of interpreters that is characteristic of Catholic biblical scholarship today. So I think, again, this publication, it has a standing by its very nature as sort of a marker of Catholic history regarding the Bible, especially since Vatican II. And so we trust that it's up to that standard of its two great predecessors.
Indeed. And it's interesting to hear you mention diversity there, Don. And Gina, perhaps you have something to comment on with respect to that.
Yeah, I think I'll pick up on Don's comment about the diversity of methods and perspectives. And in many ways, that has resulted because we've been able to gather scholars, not just from Europe and North America, which were more characteristic of the previous volumes, but we've made a real effort to involve contributors from all over the world. We have scholars' contributions in this volume from Asia, from Africa, from parts of India. We have a woman scholar from Iraq who has contributed, from a scholar in Moscow who has contributed. We have contributions from scholars in Australia. And so really in the spirit of Pope Francis, that has emphasized the importance of the global nature of the church and the inclusive nature of the church in our global world, I think in addition to the different methods, which often involve different perspectives, we have a cadre of scholars who really can represent that. And I think all of us have had the experience of looking across the assembly of these contributions and marveling at the scope and the variety of what has come our way from people that have made these contributions. We're very proud of it, but we're also very grateful to the scholars and the work that has contributed to both the magnitude, but the importance of the volume as really Catholic in the sense of universal at this time.
Could I just follow on with Gina? One of the contributors was no less than Pope Francis. And we're very happy he was able to join us in this. But seriously, in the previous two volumes, Cardinal Bea, the great hero of the Second Vatican Council and a great biblical scholar himself, wrote the foreword. The last edition in 1990 was Cardinal Martini, also a great biblical scholar and a great leader of the church. And we had noted how Pope Francis is so biblical in his orientation. His writings are steeped in the scriptures and the imagery of the scriptures. And in his opening statement on the joy of the gospel, this great exhortation that I think set the sort of the framework for his papacy. He spent a lot of time about the importance of scripture study and the preparation of the homily and preaching. So we felt it would really be wonderful if he were to agree to put the forward to this edition. And we were wonderfully surprised when it was brought to him, and he agreed and even wrote a little note that we'll put into the Bloomsbury archives, a handwritten note agreeing to having his forward put in. So we're quite proud of that.
Indeed, yes, it was definitely a red letter day when that came into my inbox, and I remember it was during the peak of the lockdown here in the UK, and it was sort of quite near the end of the working day for me, and suddenly this sort of popped up into my inbox, and I sort of thought, oh, that's a handwritten note from the Pope, and I carried on, and I thought, it's a handwritten note from the Pope, and I sent it around all of Bloomsbury, and everyone got very, very excited, and he responded much with sort of lightning speed as well, which was wonderful. It really was. Sort of I suppose we've sort of moved on to discussing in many ways sort of how this volume's going to be important and significant in the life of the church today, and the Pope's forward really makes that clear, and I think maybe now's a good point to also focus on some of those diverse contexts a bit more, and a bit more of the sort of content of those contributions. Barbara, I wonder if you'd mind talking to us about that.
Sure, thank you, Dominic. I think building on what Don was saying about the different methods that are represented in this volume, and as Gina was describing, the authors coming from such diverse contexts, we have one of the general articles that is specifically highlighting the importance of context in doing biblical interpretation. And we have 3 examples by wonderful colleagues who have helped us break open what is it like to read the Bible from a Latinx perspective, African and African American perspective, and an Asian American perspective. And not only reading from that place, but how, so bringing into the process of interpretation the very important recognition of the difference that context makes as you approach the text, but also then how you appropriate the text in your particular context. And so all 3 of those essays that are part of the Bible in Context general essay are wonderful examples of how there's no one size fits all when it comes to biblical interpretation, and how very, very important context is in this endeavor. And so I hope you're going to be as excited about reading those essays as we were as we received them.
Thanks, Barbara.
I wonder if you would say something also about the fact that the new Jerome Biblical Commentary for the 21st century is available electronically, and the benefits of that, such as being able in the future to add to the bibliography. I'm sure you could say more about the digital version.
Certainly, yeah. So the commentary is published as part of a digital resource called the Library of Catholic Thought, which is aimed sort of primarily at libraries, but that means that the commentary is available in full in digital form, and as such, I think we hope it can be a sort of a living commentary in some ways. So that, you know, if there are significant updates needed to bibliography, or if sort of down the line we feel that we really want to add a piece on something new that's come up, it will be a lot sort of easier to revise the commentary than having to wait sort of a good number of years. As Don mentioned, the previous edition was 1990, so it's been sort of in many ways long overdue to do this exercise. one of the wonderful things about the digital presentation is that it means that we can present the commentary alongside other works, writings of spirituality, the catechism, the lectionary, and so when people are searching within the commentary, they can be taken through to other texts as well, and they can sort of experience the sort of full riches of the tradition within that broader library of texts. So for us, it's been a really exciting way to present the commentary. And it's also meant that, you know, the digital edition actually came out before the print edition, which was felt a bit strange. You know, it's certainly the first time that's happened in my career as a publisher. But it's been really exciting, and I think it means that we're able to offer something sort of extremely rich, and people can search for, you know, whatever they want within the text. It's very exciting.
I think also the digital version, I think, also bespeaks to our commitment of, you know, making this really a volume that not only is holding the contributions of scholars for around the world, but really makes it available to parts of the world that maybe are less able to have, you know, significant library resources, but can, you know, access this and can access this and make it available to many people. So both for the fact that we can add to it, but also for the fact that it just becomes much more available, I think is so significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the goal that we've had with the contributor list and the structure of the volume to make it a global commentary for a global church.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the important qualities which you're underscoring now is, you know, who are the readers we hope to reach this, and it sort of covers the spectrum. It's a one volume. The printed edition is a one volume resource, and we hope it will serve parish staffs, pastors, preachers, religious educators. We hope it will serve theologians and our fellow scholars who would want to see demonstrated some of the methods and contexts that we talked about. And then for the person who loves the scriptures, maybe you're part of a Bible study group or just read it for their own spiritual nourishment. Here is something, it's an investment, it's a significant volume, but it makes so much of this church's scholarship. We hope the best scholarship that's also committed to the significance of the Bible for the life, or Christian life, that they would have this here. And as Gina said, could be updated as we go along through the electronic version. So we really hope, like the previous two volumes, that this will stand out as a very strong resource to keep alive the church's devotion to the scriptures and the influence of the scriptures on our life and thought at this time in our world. So we're very proud. We say 21st century, and that, you know, it has some of the things we're talking about, the electronic version, the diversity, the worldwide sweep of it, the accessibility of it. We think these are some of the characteristics that will mark this version as a step forward from our predecessors.
If I could add to what you were just saying, Don, another feature of this version of the Jerome commentary is that, unlike previous versions that did very technical analysis of even individual words and verse by verse, in this version of the commentary, we've asked the authors to please treat segments of the text, and especially with a view to those who are using it who in a pastoral situation and for personal enrichment. And so in many ways, I think that this is going to be a very serviceable volume in a new way.
Yes, definitely. And I think also the way the commentaries have been structured as well, and the way we've put an outline at the start of each commentary with further reading at the end, I think will only add to that. And as we've been sort of discussing things, it's really come out to me again, as it has sort of throughout the whole process, how just how rich the volume is, but also how wonderful the topical articles that we've included are. I remember when we had our first sort of planning session, thanks to the hospitality of CTU, and which was during Lent, I seem to remember, somewhat poetically, and we sat round with the whiteboard and wrote these sort of long lists of ideas that we had for creating this section of articles, and at the end of the volume, but also throughout the volume. And I remember leaving that sort of 2-day meeting with all of these photographs on my phone of the whiteboards, and a tremendous feeling of excitement about what we were going to create, and also a feeling in the back of my mind that it would take forever, and that you know we'd never see it done. And it's amazing really that it's come together. You know, more than 2 million words in total, in a relatively short number of years, and that's sort of testament to the hard work of the three of you and John Collins, and obviously to all of the contributors who've worked for us, some of whom who've stepped in sort of quite late in the process and really pulled out all the stops to write something to deadline, and that's a wonderful work of service in many ways. And you know, to be publishing this volume certainly means a great deal to me. I remember using it as an A-level student, which is sort of ages 17, 18 at high school here, getting given photocopies, and then using it throughout my degree as well, and it being this sort of monumental work on the shelf, and it means a great deal to be publishing this new edition. It's certainly the highlight of my career to date, and I wondered if I could sort of finish up in a way by asking the three of you what it has meant to you to work on this project. Perhaps if I go to you first, Gina.
Well, certainly when I signed on, I probably had less of an idea of what was involved than, of course, I had after the first couple of years. But I've often said that you know, teaching graduate students in many ways fashions my own scholarship, and I would say certainly working with these scholars from around the world on the Old Testament essays, I feel like my own scholarship has been enhanced and certainly has been expanded. I've suddenly confronted new questions that I hadn't thought about before, but I also have a huge respect for my colleagues around the world and for the kind of scholarship that is being done by people who I had no idea of their circumstances or the places they taught or the work that they had done. And it's just been incredibly enriching and also very humbling. And I also feel this great privilege to have contributed to, I think, something of monumental importance for that's really moving the meter in terms of what constitutes sound Catholic biblical scholarship. That's not only really a realization of what the Second Vatican Council talked about, but I think totally, as Don was suggesting, in tandem with what our Pope Francis has visioned. And I too am profoundly grateful for his willingness to participate with us on this venture.
Thanks, Gina. I'll move to Don.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but I just, Dominic, when you mentioned our first meeting was at C2 in Lent, I didn't know if that was a subtle commentary on our cuisine at our cafeteria. but
it was more a commentary on the bar that got wheeled out in the evening, and a positive one.
But I do, you know, one of the things, along with what Gina was saying with the authors and their responsiveness. I think most of us experienced that the people we first invited were, eager to be part of this, unless they had some other commitment that made it impossible. But also the joy for me of working with you, Dominic, and Bloomsbury on this, to a company that can shepherd this through this enormous project.
Right.
But also my colleagues, Barbara, Gina, John. We enjoyed our get-togethers. We had maybe a session or two each year, often in conjunction with the professional meetings, and sort of move through a lot of questions about format and deadlines and assignments and so on. But it was always genial and enjoyable, I have to say, and inspiring, really. So I'm grateful for my involvement in this, and consider it a privilege. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
If I could add just one more word on that, is that I had the privilege of having Joseph Fitzmyer as for most of my courses at Catholic U when I was doing doctoral studies in the 1980s. And as everyone knows, the really only sound way to approach scripture then was through historical critical method. And the previous two versions of the Jerome commentary are, for the most part, strictly from a historical critical perspective. And so I learned very well how to do biblical interpretation from that method, from Joseph Fitzmyer. But as we've been describing this, the approaches taken in this version of it move very much into other arenas and other approaches. When I first was deciding whether to say yes to the invitation to be one of the editors, I thought there was a real invitation for me to give tribute to the man from whom I learned so much when I was in doctoral studies. And so part of what it means to me to have been part of this project is I hope that from the fullness of eternity that he's as pleased as we are with our work. I hope he's not wringing his hands and saying, that isn't what I taught you. But I hope that he is delighting in the fact that he taught me and so many others well. Many of the authors in the volume were also taught by him. And I hope that he's delighting in the way that we have taken what we have learned from him and expanded and grown into what is now really groundbreaking, sound biblical scholarship, and that our students and readers will continue to do the same, we hope.
Just to add to Barbara's comment, and also to allay her concerns, I recall my Jesuit colleagues talking about Joe Fitzmyer, and before he passed away, his hope that there would be another volume, a new volume. And so I think, Barbara, he probably knew that you would, in good faith, stand on his shoulders, do what he did, but do more. So,
Great.
Wonderful, thank you. And yes, I'm so excited about the volume coming out, and I think it will definitely honour the great legacy of the previous two editions, and be a work of great significance and importance in the life of the church. I think we can probably wrap things up there unless anyone has anything else to say. But thank you very much for your time, and of course for your wonderful work on this volume.